Hey everyone, Spencer here from the Military Money Manual podcast. Today we've got a special guest. No, it's not Jamie. Jamie's actually not joining us today. We got Lieutenant Commander Webster Felix. He's a Navy prosthodontist with an incredible story that showcases the full spectrum of opportunities available in military medicine. Webb's journey started back in 2011 when he entered dental school as an E6 through the Health Services Collegiate Program, HSCP, not the more commonly known HPSP, which we talked about on a previous podcast with Dr. Pritish. And there's some critical differences that we're going to dive into. Webb's got some stuff to share with us, which is great because I'm not an expert in these military medical stuff. So I'm glad that we can have these guests on board. He commissioned in 2015, served 5 years as a general dentist in the fleet, and then was selected for duty under instruction, DUINS, which funded his 3-year prosthodontist residency at USC. Didn't pay a dime out of pocket while continuing to earn full salary, BAH, and bonuses. Nicely done. Strategically leveraged his GI Bills to earn a master's degree during dental school. And then later you were able to transfer GI Bills benefits to your wife so she could complete her nurse practitioner program debt-free at UCLA. And you're now approaching the 10-year mark for public service loan forgiveness, or PSLF. So that's going to be a nice weight off the shoulders. 14 years of active duty service, recent selection at 05, congratulations, and a family of 4 to support. Webb, I think you really have maximized military medical benefits, both for professional advancement and financial security. So I'm excited to have you on the program. We're going to unpack HSCP, DUINS, Strategic GI Bill Transfers, PSLF, all the other acronyms. And thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Definitely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the gouge you give to the community. Like, you guys are such a cool, practical, honest, straight up resource. And that's definitely what service members need. Like, I send your podcast links to all my friends. Anybody, if I love you, you probably received a Military Money Manual podcast link. So nice knowing we got people like you out there looking out for us. So appreciate you and Jamie.
I'm sure Jamie, too, would be happy to know that sharing our podcast links is your love language. I'm a bit of a goober, not very knowledgeable on medical terms. What does a prosthodontist do?
So prosthodontist, I feel like if you don't know anything about dentistry, you'd probably see a prosthodontist work and assume that they're just like, a general dentist on steroids, I guess. If it comes down to full mouth rehabilitations, we're experts in the restorative realm of dentistry. So basically, we can build anything from the ground up. I'd say, one thing about prosthodontists, I don't always have the answers, but I am equipped with a set of questions that'll get me to the answer that I need. And I feel like there's no dental issue that I could be presented with that I won't be able to at least package and try to solve. There's an OCD component to being a prosthodontist, but it's very gratifying. And, the patients that you encounter in prosthodontics, it's never like a, 1-2 out the door. Very rarely do you see that. It's really, you kind of marry your patients throughout a treatment plan, carry them from point A to B, and just that's prosthodontics in a nutshell.
I'm always amazed at, what we can do in medicine these days, and to be able to rebuild someone's mouth and teeth, and it's pretty incredible some of the technology we have and some of the techniques that we have. So good on you for being smart enough to, and hardworking enough to get to that level of dentistry. So, but let's wind it back a little bit. So that's where you are today. How did it all get started? Let's take us back to first joining the military right out of college.
So I went to Temple University in Philadelphia, my hometown, and I got my bachelor's in biology in 2011. So I was set to graduate in May 2011. And a friend of mine had been accepted to the HPSP for the Navy's medical program. So he was going to medical school via the HPSP, and he recommended that I look into a similar sort of scholarship, knowing that I had been applying to dental schools and looking at the costs. I had my eyes set on a couple of high ticket schools. He recommended I applied for a Navy scholarship, and I found a recruiter in Philadelphia. He worked me up. I went to MEPS in New Jersey. It was a very strange overnight trip. And then we wake up at 04. They get you to waddle on the ground and, do all the things. I get accepted to dental school in February of 2011. And then I was accepted for the HSCP scholarship in August of 2011. So I had applied initially for the HPSP, which was my first choice, because all I knew was that HPSP means you don't pay a dime and the check goes straight from the military to your school. and then you also get a stipend. So that was pretty attractive to me, I thought at that time. But yeah, as attractive as it is, it's also like a highly coveted scholarship. So if you're late in the cycle, you're more than likely not going to get one of those spots. And now it's even more so competitive. So luckily, I had a really good recruiter who actually submitted me for both. And so it turns out that I got the HSCP scholarship. And first I was disappointed, but this was August 1st, and I was set to start dental school on August 14th. And it was something, because it's either that or I'm taking out $90,000 a year for Columbia University College of Dental Med, where I went to do my dental training. So I accepted. I swore in August 1st, and I started dental school 2 weeks later. And I came in as an E6, a petty officer first class. And I was E6 for 2 years throughout dental school. With the HSCP program, basically you are going to receive that salary for the length of your training. And if you do refer someone in to also join the military, like get an ascension to the military, they will jump your rank. So I actually made E7 while I was in dental school. And
nice.
Upon graduation, that's when I commissioned to 03.
And it was a direct to 03 commission too.
Yep, direct to 03. Right after
That's
graduation,
awesome.
I did. I commissioned to 03, June 29th, 2015, and then I did ODS later that summer.
After dental school, so you commissioned 2015, and then where have you been stationed since then?
So after dental school, I went to Newport, Rhode Island, which is where the Officer Development School is, and also Officer Candidate School for the line officers. The ODS is mostly for chaps, medical officers, dental officers, lawyers, mostly staff corps. So I did that for the 5 weeks. And then from Newport, Rhode Island, my then fiance and I drove to San Diego on an 11-day road trip, beautiful PCS. And I was there for 1 year doing my advanced education in general dentistry residency, which was just such an awesome experience. And that was kind of like, my first taste of the military dentistry life and the types of cases that I'd be encountering, and multidisciplinary dentistry. It was a very cool experience there. Then I did that for 1 year, and my program director, who was also very pivotal in my general career path, I feel, she strongly recommended me for an independent billet with the CBs out of Port Hueneme, California. So I did a 2-year tour with the CBs, NMCB5, the professionals out of Port Hueneme. We deployed twice to Okinawa, and that was kind of our hub. And then we were kind of executing operations in the Indo-PACOM area. So I deployed twice for 6 months each during my time there. And then at that point, deployments aren't easy. My wife and I got married while we were in San Diego. Then I got deployed 2 weeks after that PCS. So
Man.
It was rough being separated for that amount of time. I was just like, all right, it was fun. I'm going to finish my obligation, which was 4 years of payback, the 4 years of dental school. And so I was going to separate, and I spoke to the detailer, and then he got me in orders to Key West, Florida. So I was there for 3 years, and that was going to be my transition up, because my wife is also from Miami. And so it was nice to have family close by, and being in Philly, East Coast, a lot closer than Port Hueneme and Okinawa, et cetera.
Yep.
So while we were there, my wife, she suggested that I applied for the prosthodontic residency within the military, because just looking at, she over the time, and I guess I can backtrack too, like I would just encounter so many people along the way, so many mentors, and everyone I encountered I felt was like prosthodontist. And, whenever I had questions and I'd seek answers about like really tough cases or treatment planning or lab things, it was always a prosthodontist. It happened to be a prosthodontist who would always kind of guide my path. And so even at my dental school interview, my interviewee, who I still keep in touch with, Dr. Marmiani, he told me that I would be a prosthodontist in 2011. And I was like, I don't even know what that is, sir. But, just sure. Just let me in.
Whatever you say.
So being in Key West, getting ready to separate, my wife says, nope, just look into it, give it a shot. And then I did apply for the duty under instruction doings. Every year, the military releases, at least the Navy VUMed releases the notice saying how many slots they have for each specialty. I applied for prosthodontics, and I got an interview, and that was COVID time. So it was all Zoom, and, it was very strange, but it was a very cool experience too, just kind of having like all these big wig, 06s just grilling me on like why I want to be a prosthodontist. I guess I impressed somebody, because they not only accepted me for doings, they accepted me for FTOS doings for prosthodontics. So FTOS is full-time out service. When you want to do a specialty, there's 2 choices. You can either do DESA, which is the hub, or the Naval Postgraduate Dental School. or you can do an out-service scholarship, or you get an out-service scholarship to attend any school that you can get accepted to. It was kind of a little bit disappointing again, because I wanted to just go to Bethesda, and I'm like, all right, if I want to be a prosthodontist, I just want to apply and then be accepted and go to Bethesda, kind of stay East Coast. But the full-time out service meant that I had to go into the match process. So I had to reapply, put everything together, get letters of recommendation, do the whole process all over again, put in my applications for prosthodontic programs just pretty much around the country. At that point, my wife and I were kind of like looking at California, just because we loved California so much while we were there, which, like being in San Diego and this, kind of being able to travel up and down the coast. It was definitely a different vibe after being in Key West for 3 years. I applied to USC, and that was kind of like UCLA was actually going to be my number one at the time, just because I'm like, I don't really know too much about either program. But USC, I applied, interviewed, and I got such an awesome vibe from the program director at the time. It was literally later that week I got an acceptance email, and I was like, well, if this is the acceptance and I've got like a couple of weeks to make the decision, I'm happy with USC, like from what I've seen. So I accepted it. I sent it up to BUMED. They said, cool, you're good to go. And we PCS. So we drove from Key West to Los Angeles. That was our third cross country road trip at the time. Yeah. So then we were in Los Angeles for 3 years. And then at that time, that's when my wife got accepted to UCLA's nurse practitioner program. And she completed her degree concurrent with my degree with our 1-year-old. So that was a very treacherous couple of years, but, very fruitful. After that, I graduated in July or May of 2024, and I got orders to Hawaii. So here I am currently as a staff prosthodontist at NMRTC Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and I'm loving every minute of it.
Man, you've had some great duty stations.
Yeah,
really,
I know. I'm
really
telling you,
out.
Big time.
Let's start with the HSCP, so the Health Services Collegiate Program. And so after talking to Dr. Sahu, I'm more familiar with the HPSP. So it sounds like that's going to cover a more well-funded program, it sounds like. Whereas the HSCP, are you taking out student loans to kind of cover the gap usually?
Usually, yeah. So the HSCP, the main benefit or the main difference would be that you are active duty. And so for all intents and purposes of my retirement progression and, my pay. So when I commissioned, I came in as an O3E as opposed to just O3 because of those 4 years of dental school that I was active duty. So you're getting your salary as E6 or E7 plus the BAH plus COLA or whatever, wherever you are. You're basically indifferentiable from any active duty personnel who just swore into the military. The tuition is 100% not covered. So I took loans out for sure, for the dental part at least. But I was using my salary to pay for my master's in dental education that I was taking concurrently with my dental degree. So,
gotcha.
And using the GI Bill as well. And so we'll get into that too, but just kind of making sure that I could at least get a chunk of this without having to take out the entire amount of loans, even though I didn't necessarily have a plan for payback at that point. It was just, I kind of felt, I'm a 21-year-old and I'm foreseeing $400,000 of debt. I don't even know what that money is or where that money's going to come from. So I think I was just trying to seek ways to offset the cost that I wasn't going to be, that I was going to be incurring due to not having the HPSP.
How does TRICARE work? Well, so since you've enlisted and you're accumulating active duty time, I'm assuming your TRICARE covered and your family is too?
So I had TRICARE from the moment I swore in to a full TRICARE coverage. So that was another, it wasn't necessarily something to move the needle too much, being that I'm taking out still loans for this amount of tuition, but there's a little chunk of student health service fees that you don't have to take on because they prefer you to use their TRICARE coverage, especially if you're within whatever the distance is from a military treatment facility, which I was not, but I would just be able to, it was TRICARE Select, I believe, which is the one that you can just kind of go to any provider that's in network and then they'll just cover it. So that time throughout dental school, I didn't pay the student health fee because that was covered by TRICARE. So that was just a little tick less. And then obviously throughout residency, I think it came in more handy because being still out service, I was still active duty throughout residency. I had my first child right before residency, but my youngest 1-year-old, he was born in California, and the hospital bills, everything fully covered, just no, I didn't see I think I paid like, $100 copay or something.
Yeah.
Minuscule compared to the cost of birthing a child.
Yeah. TRICARE is a tremendous benefit. It's, a lot of people rate it, but even so, I think it's still a bit underrated for
it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't show up on your LES, but I say it's priceless. Like the numbers, but people have talked to who separated, like, and you can attest to it on the other side, not having to think about that. Like it's something that you don't really even it's just automatic and you just take it for granted, I think.
So Webb, I want to just double click on HSCP, the collegiate program versus the HPSP. And should people be, if they're interested in either of these scholarships to get into the medical services and into the military medicine, should they be applying for both of them, do you think? Should they just pick one of them to focus on, or what's kind of the strategy there?
That's a good question. I had my recruiter didn't even tell me that he was submitting my package for both. I actually do interviews for HPSP, they're just collegiate candidates. Basically, every time I speak to one of them, one of my questions is, are you applying for just the HPSP? Have you heard about the HSCP? And most of them have not heard about it. Most recruiters probably aren't even pushing it. I'm not really sure what the sentiment is on that side, or like maybe quotas. They need to fill the HPSPs first. But I always recommend to them, I say, kick back to your recruiter. I explain to them what the HSCP program is compared to the HPSP. And if it's something that they're willing to consider, then I always tell them just have your recruiter submit you for both. I'm not sure what kind of magic my recruiter pulled, but I didn't even have to double the paperwork. I just submitted whatever paperwork I did. Same letters, statements of motivation, and my resume, obviously. And I feel like they were just submitted in tandem, which seems like something you can do clearly, unless he lied to me and he only submitted me for HSCP. Where you at?
You might be 1 for 1 here, and you didn't even know it.
Didn't even know it.
Your whole life, you've been living a lie, thinking that you didn't make it into HPSP. Never even applied.
Right?
Let's put some numbers on this. How much student loan did you have graduating dental school?
Columbia University is, as you know, private school, Ivy League. At that time, from 2011 to 2015, tuition plus cost of living was around, I'd say, $90K a year. Because living in Manhattan, and they gave us subsidized housing. We do have, like, at least for the medical campus, we had a set of towers and campus housing that they gave us at a lower rate. But even in Washington Heights, some people decide to live off campus, and it's not cheap. It's still Manhattan. Yeah. Totally graduating after all things considered. Almost about $500,000, I'd say. Probably somewhere in the low fours for everything graduating dental school. Yeah, I think even now, it's actually $120K per year. I looked it up, including cost of living, and it does go up every year from what I'm seeing. So yeah, most times I feel like it's par for the course to leave dental school with almost $500,000 under your belt if you're taking loans.
What was the strategy there? Were you making minimum payments on that and planning on the public service loan forgiveness program? Or how did you calculate and strategize that?
Yeah, good question. So I had no idea about the PSLF at that point. I graduated in May, and then I did ODS. And then when I got to my duty station, my commander at the time, she sat us all down. There were 10 co-residents we had, and we were all fresh out of dental school, fresh new lieutenants to the Navy. And with all of us pretty much had the similar numbers under our belt as far as loans go. And my expectation was, I was going to figure out some sort of way to pay it back. I don't know, like being a dentist, you won't become a millionaire just like by waving your fingers, but I expected to pay it back in some capacity. And she strongly recommended that we consolidated all our loans, because a lot of the loans that I took out were also RAD plus loans, or like privatized loans. So there was a certain cap on subsidized loans you could take versus unsubsidized. And then to try to piece it all together, you try to avoid those private loans like the plague, but sometimes you got no choice. My commander just basically told us, hey, consolidate them all and turn them all into federal loans. And then you sign up for this public service loan forgiveness, being a public servant for 10 years. And then the remainder of, it's like an income-based repayment plan. So you pay based on, I forget the formula, but I think it's like 10% of your discretionary income or whatever they do. And you'll be paying that. So my initial payments were like, it was sweet. It was like $170 a month.
Wow.
Because at that point, it was still reflecting my E6 salary.
Yeah. Right.
And so that first year, it was such a blessing. I was like, all right, 100, throw $178 at this a month. Like, that's great. But then as soon as they made you recertify your income, then it's like, oh, this guy is a lieutenant, 03E at that. So it did jump. And currently it's at around, I think, 800 or 900 a month currently.
Okay.
But it kind of just gradually jumped from 170 or so up to its current level. Yeah. So the program director, she basically said, don't stop paying. It doesn't matter if you're hard on money, maybe just adjust your budget, but keep paying, keep that clock ticking, because you never know what is going to happen. At that point, obviously there was a different administration, so there were different rules. And so you just never know. And so you just always want to kind of have your ducks in a row, because things can change at a moment's notice, which we're seeing now with the loan limits for most new borrowers. I think for starting July 2026, they're not going to be able to borrow as much as I did for school. So it's, I feel like that might all push a lot of people towards HPSP, maybe HSCP, those kind of programs, if you are interested in medical dental school. But yeah, she was invaluable in my early journey, at least, because, I was just like, all right, sure, like, I'll do it for you, ma'am. You got it. And sure enough, like it's a blessing looking back, because I just hit my 10th year this month, and my first payment was October 2015. Yeah, so I'll be putting in the buyback requests there were 1 or 2 months where I was deployed and we were planning for the wedding, and I didn't heed her advice, but I was like, yeah, I could use a couple $1,000s extra in my pocket per month. So I'll be putting in the buyback requests and just praying for the best. But it looks like the numbers are jiving in my favor at this point. We'll see.
And approximately how much are you expecting to have forgiven?
It should be, because for many years, I do the payments that were asked of me. And then, it's so frustrating to see, because all of it goes to interest. Like there is, the principal is like, 0 to principal, 100% of your payment just went to the interest, and then interest just jumped this following month. So yeah, it's going to be almost $500,000.
Wow. That's awesome. Now, I think it was earlier this year, there was a lot of issues with the PSLF program where people weren't getting paperwork processed, or they thought they were eligible and they weren't eligible. Have you heard any scuttlebutt kind of in the community that you're in? Or are people they're getting their paperwork processed and they're seeing the loans forgiven?
The issue early on was that a lot of borrowers were actually in the wrong type of loan or repayment plan. So only direct loans would qualify for forgiveness. And so people who had borrowed before, I think it was like 2014 or so, and had FFEL or Perkins loans, or didn't consolidate their loans into federal loans like I did in 2015, those loans are ineligible for forgiveness. And so that wasn't explicitly stated, I guess, or it wasn't something that people were explicitly aware of, but they found out when it came down to it, and they're like, oh, check that box 10 years ago and I might be okay, but now it's going to be another 10 years. But since then, it's, from what I've seen, I am a part of a couple, Facebook communities, and, I'm seeing everyone posting their green ribbons. And so it is happening. And I think just that initial, or folks who were not as informed, I think, unfortunately, they kind of were like the canary in the coal mines for others. Yeah. So like people kind of figured it out early on, and now people going forward know that you want to consolidate to federal loans. Definitely, if you got FFBL or direct loans, get those consolidated and converted to federal loans. Otherwise, they will not be eligible for forgiveness.
That's going to be pretty amazing when your net worth jumps by $500,000.
Oh man, bro! Like just check
that's
this. Refreshing.
That's a big movement.
Refreshing my credit report like over and over again. Like
yeah. Wow. You guys better go out to dinner or something to celebrate. That's a big.
We're gonna do more than that. Maybe we'll come to New Zealand and check you out.
Come to New Zealand. Yeah, exactly. Or go to Lanai. Go stay at the Four Seasons Lanai. That's You gotta mark that occasion. So DUINS, duty under instruction. I had never heard of this program. I think the Air Force does have similar programs where you stay active duty, but you go back to school. Talk to me about how it worked for you. How did you hear about it? If someone's interested in it, where should they go to learn more about it?
So duty under instruction, they're actually at the Naval Postgraduate Dental School. They usually take one Air Force officer for a lot of their programs, like the Comprehensive Dentistry Residency. I believe they take one Air Force officer, and there might also be one in the perio specialty. I'm not sure, but for sure they do a lot of cross service. And down in San Antonio, I believe, is where a lot of the postgraduate training for Air Force officers are. But yeah, the duty under instruction, I had always seen it, and every year they send that notice out, and it's always one of those things where it's almost like the Super Bowl, I guess, for like Navy dentistry. It's like, all right, like what are they offering this year? Like, am I going to drop an application? And, I think being a general dentist in the Navy, as I did for 5 years, it, has its perks, of course, but I think for me, it just wasn't something that was as gratifying for me as when I got to work on those larger cases with the prosthodontists and the different specialties. I think like, being pros, you're going to be like a quarterback of most treatment plans. And so I saw that and I was like, I definitely, after those years that I had kind of been out in the fleet and just been in a lot of these different scenarios where I was encountering these great mentors, I saw that I wanted to do doings in one way or another, because I knew I wanted to do doings, but then it was also, if I was going to get out of the military, I knew I wanted to do a specialty. So it wasn't necessarily doings. I knew I wanted to specialize. And so doings, it was either I'm going to do it here or I'm going to get out and do it there and, figure out my way on the outside. So the duty under instruction is, it's very competitive. And I think just this past year, there was only one prosthodontist selected for the duty under instruction, and they're going to the Bethesda schoolhouse. But the year before, I had a good friend of mine who was accepted for the doings, and she decided to drop her application for USC. And so she just started, and she just completed her first year at USC Pros as well. So, every now and then you get that unicorn where they just kind of drop the funding and they say, hey, we can let you out service, or we'll take you in service. But every year, pending funding, you do have the opportunity, general dentists have the opportunity to lead up to some sort of specialty.
Yeah, so many opportunities out there. So many. Like on the pilot side, there's always opportunities to upgrade, test pilot school, go fly with a foreign air force. There's so many opportunities the military presents. It really is just like the world's your oyster, man. I love it.
Yeah, you just got to read up, stay in the loop, stay tapped in and see what's out there. Because, obviously the cost too, like, your fee will go up as you specialize and as you get into those more niche programs. So, if you're looking to also grow your net worth while you're serving, I think that specializing is an awesome tool, because, as military officers, we're kind of capped, like everyone knows. You can Google how much an 04 in the military makes, and, based on years of service, like it's very standardized. But the way to kind of stack those chips is to figure out specialties, figure out board certification, incentive pay, all those sort of things. And you got to kind of, make that work in your favor if you're trying to sort of move the needle a bit.
Making yourself just, the most valuable person you can while you're on active duty. So then when you go back into the civilian world one day, then you've already got all the certifications, you've got all the credentials, and you're just ready to smash it.
Absolutely.
So, on the civilian versus military dentistry, one complaint, I've got a cousin who's a dentist. One thing that he's always complained about is on the civilian side, you got to like push treatments. And this is something that my wife, who's not an American, that she noticed when she came to America. She's like, every time I go to the dentist, they always want to do a filling. Like my teeth are fine. So is that something that you see, like you don't have as much pressure on the military side because like there's no profit incentive, or is my cousin being a bit dramatic in how much they're pushing fillings on the civilian side?
I was literally just talking about this with one of my best friends, because he had a friend, I guess, who had gotten a quote for one exorbitant amount of money for some dental work, and then went to another dentist and was given a much significantly lower quote. But, not having been a civilian dentist ever, but knowing a lot of civilian dentists, obviously a lot of my friends who I graduated with from school who are doing pretty well. I guess it varies from dentist to dentist, but the long and the short of it is, it's nice to not have to push a treatment plan, because I get paid the same whether or not I do a cleaning on you or if I do a full mouth rehabilitation. Right. Which, in some senses, it's like, that's not as attractive, but, I think it gives me the genuineness, I guess, as a provider to know that, and the patient knows that I don't make a dime from this, outside of the benefit that it provides to you. So that's kind of at the forefront. Sure, it'd be more lucrative on the outside to push a treatment plan that I know the patient needs, but trust, I guess, would have to be there from the patient side. And so I hear many stories like that where, they feel like they're being cavities and fillings are being pushed on them. But there's lots of tools on the outside now that kind of help it appear to be more of an objective parameter. There's AI, x-rays, and, this is like a third party that's telling you like, hey, you do need this filling. It's not just me trying to pay my car note this month. Like, and so I think that, the military side has offered me like a really nice sense of just genuine care for my patients. And they definitely feel that from me. So I would say that's a big plus for me.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So you've been practicing dentistry for 10 years now. What do you think the pay differential is between your civilian counterparts who graduated about the same time? Do you think it's like 2x, 3x?
So there's certain, especially for prosthodontists, a lot of practices and like DSOs, and I don't want to put any particular company out there, but I know there's some, they'll kind of establish cookie cutter treatment plans and they just want a prosthodontist to sign off on it. And the pay is great, but you're also, I think your autonomy is kind of shot in a lot of those circumstances. Yeah. But, if you're making, I would say a lot of those docs are probably making double as far as like if you compare an LES to LES. Yeah. But, it's kind of, as we kind of discussed it, things like TRICARE and, BAH and those kind of things that don't necessarily show up like as you talk about how much I make as a prosthodontist, it's a lot closer than it would look on paper. Yeah. I would think. Yeah. Now, obviously on the outside, there's, your volume was probably going to be a lot higher too. So, you want to work 24 hours a day and, you could probably clear $1 million as a prosthodontist with some of these companies. I don't know, that's like probably a bit of a reach, but it's more for sure, but not as much as you would think.
That's a good way to put it. Okay, so the last topic that I kind of wanted to touch on was using the GI Bill strategically. So why don't you just walk us through kind of when you became eligible and then how you made sure that you were maximizing it?
For any active duty person, you are, and I think was it Kate Harrell, right? Who was on your podcast a couple times? Yep. Those are really great episodes. Like just kind of hearing them, even in retrospect, I'm like, I wish I would have had her in my ear a couple years back too, just because I'd say everyone should go back and listen to that. And I've shared that episode with a lot of my friends too. Yeah, after 90 days of active duty service, that's when you're eligible for GI Bill benefits. So you can basically, I think it's like 25% of whatever the maximum cap would be for that first year. And then as you serve, I think up to 3 years, I believe it's 3 years. Don't quote me on that. Go back to that podcast episode. After 3 years, then you get 100% of whatever the maximum is for your program. So in addition to that, after 90 days, you can add an additional beneficiary to your, so you can transfer your benefits. That does incur a 4-year service obligation. So that's one of those things that also, if you know that you're going to do that, you definitely want to do it sooner rather than later. And I realized that obviously once I had applied for residency programs and, I'd gotten into the doings and I'm like, okay, we want to consider this and I'll be in the military for at least 4 more years, definitely 6 years with the payback. Doesn't hurt to just sign that right now because last thing you want to do is sign that at the end of an obligation and then incur an additional obligation that, that doesn't make sense to not do it concurrently. So that's what I ended up doing. And so I transferred 15 months of my GI Bill to my wife who completed her NP degree at UCLA with all that. And, she didn't pay a dime either and she got a book stipend and, and there's still 15 months remaining on mine and I can allocate to one of the kids or, if she wants to go back for her doctorate, we could do that too. But it's definitely been really cool to be able to have that as a resource to try to help build our family's generational wealth. Cause that's sure, I got the HSCP and, you get like the do-ins and all these things, but it's nice when we can lift the rest of our family up as well. So I think GI Bill is awesome. So everyone should be maximizing. It's
like you said, Kate Horrell, she's been on the podcast a couple of times, but she's just got a new book out about college planning for military families on Amazon. And that's the resource when someone has a question for me and they're like, hey, what do I do with my GI Bill? Or how do I think about college? Or what about 529 plans? I'm like, you got to go read Kate's stuff. Like she's thought about this a lot more than I have, but her intentions are completely aligned with yours. Her only incentive is that you maximize your benefits with the least amount of stress. I love having people like that on the podcast. This has been a tour de force, man. I've learned a lot about military Navy dentistry. I've learned how to pronounce prosthodontics. I'm very excited about that. I'm gonna use that in
drop that one.
I'm gonna drop that at the club in the next couple weeks. But HPSP HPSP, the public service loan forgiveness. I mean, that's a massive benefit right there. And for a lot of our military medicine people, you're going to be doing 10 years anyways, right? By the time you serve your initial obligation, maybe you go and get board certified or get a new designation or whatever. There's always something that's going to keep you around. So it's very rare that you wouldn't be eligible for a PSLF with 10 years, but you got to be strategic about it. Like you talked about, by consolidating, making sure your loans are all federal loans, make sure they're all going to be active, or they're all going to be eligible for that forgiveness program. Is there any good resource? Like, is there a Facebook group or a Reddit or website that is kind of like your go-to for PSLF?
So yeah, there's a group called Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program Support. Right now it's got about 216,000 members, and you have to be approved and like vetted. So it's like, there's no spammers in there, like people who are like, not genuinely seeking information and seeking to transfer information on the loans. And the administrators are great. There's all sorts of random questions that come through, and people who are further along on their journey, people who are just early in their journey. So it's like a great vertical learning tool. So that's my go-to for sure. It's on Facebook, Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program Support. And you'll just have to verify that you're not a bot, and they'll pretty much let you in there, and you can get all the information you need.
That's great. That's great. Webb, anything else you want to share with the listener before we get going here, or if they want to learn more about what you're up to, anywhere that you want to point people to?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd say just to close it out, as definitely as the son of Haitian immigrants, my parents were both born in Haiti, and they came over in 1987, 2 years before I was born. Grabbed blue-collar jobs all of their careers, and both recently retired, but working literally up until their almost 70s. And so I've lived firsthand how military medicine can completely change the trajectory of your family, because we struggled coming up, I would say, but they made sure that we had everything we needed, and they set us all up for success. So I think it's just been a journey. And so being in the military, getting the HSCP scholarship, having the TRICARE to be able to take care of my family, getting the doings, being able to have my loans under the PSLF and the GI Bill for my family. I feel like it's just been such an awesome ride. And, Navy's invested in me as a clinician and my wife as a nurse practitioner, and in our kids' futures as well. And I deployed, as I mentioned, and I spent significant time away from the family, which, it's not always going to be easy, but, making the most of every program benefit available, I say, is like everyone I speak to was also separating. They're like, go to school, get something out of it, because we are here to serve, but, I think it's important that you also get something out of this relationship with the military, because there's too many resources out there for you to not. That's why I say when I say like these benefits can create generational wealth for your family, financial stability, get your education. Definitely, like I mentioned, having this podcast is such an awesome resource, because, I can go down so many rabbit holes with the different topics that you guys come up with, like from stuff like the Amex Platinum, the CSR, which I recently got, and my wife recently got under the MLA. And it's just it's actually becoming my favorite card too on the low. It's got a lot of cool perks,
Yeah.
Yeah. And even like when we were PCSing from LA, I don't know if it was you or Jamie who would PCS from the East Coast to Hawaii. And I think you did a PPM or whoever did it, and I was just like, I told my wife, babe, I just learned this cool trick on the podcast. I'm going to move us out of here to Hawaii. She said, hell no, you're not doing that. Yeah, I'm like 8 months pregnant. You're not going to stress me out with that. So, but needless to say, I'm going to do it one day. I'm going to try it out. It's been an honor to just be here and, kind of be one of the folks who can share a story on the show. And, I hope my story can help people realize a strategy for themselves, whether it's, military medicine or, just civil engineer corps. Military service can open so many doors to so many careers and, so many just lifelong benefits and financial freedom if you work it out as such. So that's all I got on that.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing everything you did. It's really, Jamie and I, we started the show because we just wanted to share what we had learned, like what had worked for us, and just pay it back. Let everybody know, like, hey, this is a huge opportunity. Like, you don't have to waste it. You don't have to leave the military with debt or a negative net worth or, with that much money. And, if you make it, especially on the officer side, if you make it to a 20-year career and you collect a military pension, man, you should have been saving along the way. You could be a multimillionaire when you retire plus the pension. But it's true on the enlisted side too. It's a little bit harder because the pay is just lower, but it's absolutely possible. I've talked to tons of enlisted millionaires, and it's definitely possible. You don't even need a wife who's a dentist or a nurse practitioner. You can do it on a single salary. It's hard mode, but it is possible. And yeah, so I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your expertise. This is an awesome opportunity. If anybody out there is interested in military medicine, we've got another episode you should check out, which was with Dr. Pritish Sahu, and that was a Army medicine. And I think he estimated something like $700,000 of benefit that he's received in education. And it sounds like you're going to be very similar track, somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million of financial or of educational benefits that you've received from your military service. And I'll tell you what, like, it is a cheat code. I wish more people knew about it, because then that just means we get a higher caliber of applicants. When you mentioned those duty stations where you're at, I think most people would say, I could probably do that.
I can swing that.
That doesn't sound too bad. Yeah. Deployments to the Indo-PACOM. I mean, Guam can be a little, and Okinawa actually too, they can be a little humid. Most of the tropical islands aren't too bad. So
yeah. Until they stick you in 29 palms, and then you'll be,
don't mention that when this is a recruiting. This is a recruiting podcast. But yeah, that's usually not a risk on the Air Force side. So I will say that's the incentive to go blue there. But yeah, hey, Webb, thanks for coming on the podcast. Thanks for sharing everything that you did. Maybe we should have you back in a couple of years. You can tell us about how you're getting ready for your military retirement.
Absolutely. Would love to. Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate you. And if you want to check out any of my dental work, at Prostopoppy on Instagram, I got some cool cases on there. So, you can see what a prosthodontist does, because I think being a prosthodontist is the coolest thing. So check it out.
We'll make sure we put that link in the show notes. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Military Money Manual podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
The views and opinions presented here are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of the DoD or its components. Reference to any commercial products or services does not constitute DoD endorsement of those products or services.